We have all these ideas, all these plans, all these calls to adventure. But how do we choose which projects to work on next? Hello and welcome to the Wanderings podcast. My name is Pedro Bonatto. I am a photographer and a musician. And in this show, usually, I do interviews with some people that have inspired me and I hope will inspire you too. But for the last few months, I've been having this urge to really start something different, to really reimagine this show based on my current interests, my current work. And I decided to start to add not only the interviews, but to have the solo shows, and this will serve as sort of like a pilot episode with the vision that I have for this format of interacting directly with you. For the past 4 years, I've been traveling around the world together with my wife, dancer Jana Komarnicka, and I've been developing projects in photography, in video, writing, music, podcast, online learning. And it has been a fantastic experience, and I wanted to really share the struggles and the successes and everything with you. And I thought it would be very cool to do this in this solo show where I can show some work in progress, some things that are inspiring me, some things that I'm debating and trying to deal with. And my hope is that you'll be able to use that on your own creative journey, no matter if you're an artist or if you have any other kind of job. This will not be advice per se. It's more like I'm sharing what I'm working through. I share the resources that I'm using to find answers for myself. And my hope is to create this community where we can actually share our experiences, share tips. And that's why I also want in this new format to invite you to send your questions and that I can answer on the show. You can do that at pedrobonatto.com/ask. You can also find me on all social media. I am at Pedro Bonatto basically everywhere, and then you can DM me if you want. You can send me questions via text. You can do that via audio or video. That would be amazing because then you can play on the show. You can do this anonymously if you prefer. Just say, oh, I don't mention my name. I just want to hear you talk about the question. Or if you'd like me to do a shout out to your socials, that's fine too. So for this new format of the show that I would like to do, hopefully weekly, is get a topic and explore it through the lens of which work did I create that is sort of like speaks to that question, and my own process of doing this, and all the resources that I get for getting inspiration unstuck and really getting, sometimes optimizing that creative work. So I will be talking about books, I'll be talking about quotes, interesting artists, podcasts, videos, TV series, places to go, approaches to do different things. And I hope that will be like a source, a spark for you. The idea for this show has been a long time in the making, but what pulled the trigger was actually when I was in Cambodia a couple months ago. I was in Siem Reap, which is where all the big temples are, and I was doing some projects there. And I stumbled upon this beautiful place called Teams Gallery. Teams Gallery, it's a museum, art gallery, as the name suggests. It's also an artisan place. It's like an art studio. It's a place for events. It's a fantastic spot. And then we ended up having the chance to do an art residency there and did a couple projects. What really inspired me was this. There are all these Buddhas, these Buddha statues that they had over there. And then on the wall, they had written a Buddhist principle that is give, even if you only have a little. That was on my mind. Then, here in Cairo, where I am right now, I was looking at the pyramids and reading this book, which is called Orientalist Lives by James Perry. And it basically follows the artists from the 18th and 19th century, mainly from Europe, that came to the Middle East, like me, to develop their work, create their beautiful artworks, which have inspired my own artworks, as we'll see later. But what this book inspired me to was it was so cool to see some of my favorite painters through the light of how are the travels, how difficult it was to travel back then compared to today. and how quote-unquote exotic the Middle East was, because literally people haven't been here in a long time. And I think, I am Brazilian, I'm not European, but me coming here, it had that strange feel of being completely foreign, and at the same time very familiar, because a lot of my music work is actually related to the Middle East, and my photography is certainly inspired by Middle Eastern themes. So seeing the lives of these artists from 200 years ago really inspired me, because I was like, oh, it would be so cool to actually like tag along with them in their art adventures. And then I thought, well, I have a camera, I have recorders, why am I waiting to share the experience I'm having? There's a little bit of insecurity, because we all have those insecurities. That's why I haven't shared a lot of the work that I have done. Unfortunately, it's something that I'm working through, and this is one of the steps. So my goal is to be, and that's my promise to you, to be completely transparent, to be completely open, to show my struggles, to show my regrets, to show my successes, the small and the big ones, the personal ones, and the things that I've learned along the way. Let me just tell a little bit about myself and my context, so that you can have a little bit of an idea, like a gestalt view of what I'm doing, what I'm all about, and see that through the lens that will be useful for you. First, I am a photographer. I specialize in fine art and advertising photography. This is the thing that really calls to me, especially as a fine artist, as a fine art photographer. And my love is for portraiture, is to create worlds, is to invent places that have this mythological, historical references, that have this psychological themes. That's what I'm attracted to. Then I also have this other passion, that is, I am a musician. I basically play percussion instruments. The main one that I have is called the tabla, or the darbuka, or the dumbek. They're all derbaque. There's all sorts of names for the same drum. We'll talk on a future episode a little bit more about that. But that was the tool that opened up the world for me, the world of world music, that went not only from Middle Eastern music, but it opened basically everywhere, because music travels, and as music travels, people incorporate ideas from other places, and that's what I've been trying to do in my photography and my music work throughout this time. As I mentioned, I lived in many places around the world, and it was a childhood dream of mine, like not even childhood, like okay, in my teens, to travel the world as a working artist, but not in a hurry. I wanted to not to go to place to place on a tour and then do drugs and get crazy. It was, no, let me go there, let me settle on the place. Very much like these Orientalist painters did, that they made the Middle East their home, and I wanted to make different places around the world my home, and to make them sort of like you stay there long enough so that the place can really touch you and change you. Sometimes that's fast, sometimes this takes a while. So as I mentioned, I came from Brazil, then I went to Canada to do a master's degree. So I have this master's degree from the Ontario College of Art and Design in Toronto, Canada. And after that, I started a band, I got married, I really started working as a freelance photographer over there. Then I decided to go on this travel adventure, that's 2019. And then since my wife is Ukrainian and I had lots of connections to the Ukrainian community in Toronto, I decided to, okay, let's go to Ukraine. And then the pandemic hit. And then we decided, you know what, we gave our apartment over there and we decided to travel the world after the bans on travel started happening in the pandemic. And then we were actually I lived in many places around Ukraine, in Turkey, in Cambodia, in Thailand, here in Egypt, in Canada, as I mentioned, in the US, and many places around the world. And I was able to spend at least a few months in each of those places actually developing projects with the people that live there. And that gave me like this interesting experience that I'm so dying to share with you here in this podcast, but I'll go slow because I tend to be like very talkative, as you will see. What kind of changed was that we were actually in Odessa in 10 days before the war started a couple years ago, and we were able to, fortunately, to leave the place. But that left a mark, both in me and my wife, because we were living in Ukraine back then. But now, since this is part of life and part of what's going on, My goal is to share the beautiful cultures of the world. Maybe it's a naive vision, but so that we don't fight each other. Because if we break bread together, if we share our cultures, if we depend on one another, maybe these things throughout the centuries will be diminished. That's my hope. Now, you will see an artist in the making. Me searching for mastery. As I mentioned, I don't consider myself a master or a purveyor of advice, but I do have ideas that I think might be useful. It's what my wife calls the Pedropedia. It's all these associations that I do, all this research that I do in different kinds of areas, in art, in science, in basically in culture, in basically any field, as you will see. And my invitation is for you to join me in these adventures. I will show you my work. I will show the places I'm going. I'll give you my impressions of what I learned from each place. And that's my invitation. Okay, enough about me. Let's talk about the show, about today's episode. This is episode 24 of the Wonders Podcast, the first one in this new format. And it's all about choosing which project to work on. So this theme was actually inspired by a conversation I had right here in this table. I'm staying at Yasmina's B&B for my art residency with Yana here in Cairo. And there was another girl visiting here, a Persian girl. She was, I think, 23-year-old. She had just finished her undergrad in the US, and then she came here to Cairo to work as a journalist, but she was starting to do a little bit of dance, and she was also she had these aspirations of being a singer and having these massive collaborations and having this life in the arts, let's say, that she was really wanted to inspire people and all that. And we were striking a conversation, and since this year I turned 45, so I'm officially old and officially middle-aged with luck. She asked me oh, but I have all these ideas, all these ambitions, and I don't know how to start, and I have all these projects, and how do I choose which project to work on right now? Searching for me for answers. And then I told her well, welcome to the club. I'm on the same boat. And I thought, okay, this will be actually very cool because I'm literally working through this with lots of different resources. And recently I found one that I thought was very, very useful and really, for me, really unlocked a lot of my clarity about which projects to work on, how to decide about them. And I want to share this toolkit with you, which is what I've been doing for basically all my life, but for the past few months, maybe few years, collecting all this information. And I'll give a brief summary of a way of thinking that I am having, and I hope it will be useful for you when you're trying to decide which projects to work on. Just as a context, as I mentioned, I have a problem. Any of my parts of my work could be a full-time profession. I could focus on portraiture and ethnic fashion and fine art as a job. I could work fully, as I did at some point, as a musician. I could be just working on my online business with my wife in online education, which actually allows us to really travel and give us a lot of freedom. Each one of them would be an independent career. And I also have aspirations to do, they are sometimes big, sometimes small, installation art, children's book, an animation series, and one that is like a multimedia installation that involves all these elements of the kind of work that I like to do, which was actually what I did during my master's, and I would love to come back to that. So I have all these projects, and there are not enough time in the day, there's not enough time in the day, there is not, at least we think so, and I was trying to find places, inspiration to how to choose, and actually then how to implement it. This will not be advice, it will be sharing with you the advice that I am taking from people that I consider masters on it. The first one, I love at first trying to see what's going on from a mythological point of view. Okay, Pedro has gone crazy. No, stay with me, it's important. It's sort of like, I call mythological, you can call a mission, religion, religious, like a calling, you can call it whatever you want, but you need to see it from that point of view, at least to start, and then you can get more practical, which you will. And then there I want to call to the actual name of this episode, that is the creative call to adventure. That's a reference to Joseph Campbell's work. He is a mythology scholar. He wrote The Hero with a Thousand Faces. If you know about it, that's great. Let's just refresh it. If you don't, I highly recommend you go check it out. There is even like a 5-part like documentary, sort of like conversation series that he did. He explains his concept. But here I'm referring to one of the steps in what he calls the hero's journey. Basically, he went all around the world and he saw stories, and then he saw these common elements that in every story, sort of like throughout history, since Gilgamesh all the way to Star Wars, people sort of like have these beats, these steps in stories which sort of like correspond to our own life as a human being. And it usually starts with what he calls the ordinary world, where you're there, you're doing your thing, everything's sort of familiar, but there's something that's sometimes going a little bit wrong, something's off. And then there is this, what's called a call to adventure, which is the second step on the hero's journey. And don't worry, we'll stop right there. There are 17 steps, but for the purposes of this episode, we're just going to talk about this to frame the context of which projects to choose from. It's your creative call to adventure. It is, which one are you going to follow? Now, I just need to go a little bit further ahead and mention to you that the third part of this story is the refusal of the call, where the hero says, no, 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 I can't do this. Oh no, it's too big for me. And then it unfolds. But at some point, you have to not only hear the call to adventure, but actually answer it. Here I'd like to point out, for the first time here, to a photo of mine that actually I try to encompass that concept. This is a photo that I actually created inspired by the second step in the hero's journey, the call to adventure. And I would love to share it with you right now to sort of like illustrate the next point that I'm going to make. I call this photo Wanderers Still. It was actually inspired by this quote by Carl Sagan that he said, "We began as wanderers and we are wanderers still." He was talking about the history of humanity as we were hunter-gatherers for a long time and then we settled, but that we still have this urge to explore, to go see things, to go do things in the world. And then in this photo that I created as part of one of my fine art series that is called The Orientalist, where I got together with musicians and dancers from all over the world that are inspired by Middle Eastern traditions. And then I recreated this, not recreated, I was inspired by painters like the Orientalist painters that I mentioned before. And we created the scenes in Western countries that are inspired by that. It's about this mixture of cultures. So I encourage you to go take a look at that series if you're interested. But in the context of our conversation today about the call to adventure, about the creative call to adventure, this photo, let's take a look at it. It was portrayed by a fantastic Romanian dancer living in Toronto, Canada, called Miruna Soiu. She's wearing this dress that I think has these Greek patterns, and she is in this beach, and it's sort of like there's this storm, and she's carrying a lamp. I have a thing for lamps. You will see later what I mean throughout these episodes, but I'm drawn to the idea of lamps, something that is shining. And there is this boat, and she's at this beach, and my idea was, is she coming or is she going? Is this call to adventure? Did she answer the call and went through the storms and she's actually arrived at the shore? Or is she pondering? Is she carrying the lamp and deciding if she's going to leave? She has her boat. Is it enough to survive the trip? That was sort of like what I was playing with on my play with the idea of the call to adventure. And I mentioned this photograph because there is a way where we can incorporate our struggles, our fascinations in the work that we're doing while we are trying to figure out what's our big vision or which project to do next. And that will take me to the next step about this, that is As I mentioned, you had the ordinary world, the call to adventure, and then you have the refusal of the call. When you have a lots of projects, there is an implicit situation here that you actually refused all of them because they came at some point and you didn't do them, or you gave a little start and you stopped, which is basically a refusal. And now you have all of them and they are asking for your attention. So maybe you decide to hurry and really go and try to do all of them, or you'll try to be very strategic, and then you want to, which one will be the best, like most bang for the buck, let's say. Or you can say, oh, let me try to be super hippy doopy, me going to be discover my inner goddess, and this is the one that will unlock everything. All those traps that we do in artwork. I know because I do that all the time. So on a high, let's say, soul level, I would recommend taking a look at Joseph Campbell. There are lots of lectures from him. There is The Hero with 1,000 Faces. There is Masks of God, The Pathways to Bliss. There is all sorts of resources from him that I think would be very cool to see. They have an actual Joseph Campbell Foundation that has their own podcast, which is also a very cool resource to go check out if you're interested from that point of view. Now let's go to a bit more practical things and other resources that I think would be interesting until we get culminated to the thing that really spoke to me. First, you can go check out Neil Gaiman, Make with Art Commencement Speech. It is on YouTube. I will put on the show notes for this episode all the links. Everything that I'm talking about, it will be there. But basically in this commencement speech, he talked about the fact that he did not really have a plan when he began the idea of actually being a writer. He was a journalist for a while so that he could pay the bills and actually be writing and have that experience. And that he did one work that was just for money, but then it fell through, didn't work out, and then he didn't even have the work because he was not really proud of it. And then he also said, well, I'll try to remember to always do things because I really want to do them, and not to do things just because of the paycheck. And the way that he visualized it, that I thought it was very useful, it's like, imagine that the thing you want to do is like this big mountain, and you have to see if the thing that you're doing will get you closer to the mountain or away from it. I think that's a very unique, interesting way of seeing it. Highly recommend, go check it out. The second one is another, like, very, let's say, famous, traditional, very interesting commencement address by Steve Jobs. And that one, of course, is like super high-end person that did lots of things in his life. And the thing that really appealed to me was, back then, was this idea that you gotta find what you love, everything else is secondary. I think that still applies because you have to have that compass, even if you're doing something that is like tangential, if you're taking like a side road to that project, at least that's the way that I see it, you have to keep an idea of what you love to do. I'll give you one example. I love to talk about this stuff, and I really decided to actually do this kind of project that I am actually talking and trying to share this knowledge, this inspiration, this beauty that inspires you to act, a la Dante Alighieri quote. I'm really passionate about it. It took a long time for me to admit that this is something I would love to do. It was one of those things like, oh, when I am actually the master of the universe, I'm going to do it. It's like, no, I'm going to do as a working artist that is stumbling through the world trying to make this happen. Another thing that really inspired me was, but also freaked me out, was when Jordan Peterson was talking about this idea of aiming at the highest star you can think of. Like, what's the most ideal thing you could be doing? Talking about responsibility, talking about legacy, talking about beauty, talking about service and all that stuff. Independent of opinion, if you're on the right or the left, if you think it's Hitler or not, like, that's sort of like not the point. It's about the idea itself, which is actually very cool. But that just made me worried. Just made, oh my God, I need to go do this thing. That did not really help. But at the same time, it was true. Now, very cool resource that I highly recommend, not only to artists, but to anyone doing any kind of creativity in their work. As a side note, I see this as photographer Chase Jarvis sees, that is creativity with a capital C, as he points out. That is, it's not that just because you are a photographer, a musician, a dancer, sculptor, painter, that you are a creative. We have creativity everywhere in our lives. If you are, unless you're a creative accountant and you're trying to like smuggle some money out of the government or out of people, but still that also requires creativity. So I see creativity as ways of doing things which are not the traditional way of doing it. That's sort of like I see creativity. It's new ways of doing things. They may not be all amazing, they may be random, they may be whatever, but that's how I see creativity. So in that sense, it's useful for everybody. So this book by Stephen Pressfield, it's called The War of Art, Fighting the Inner Creative Battles, I think is the subtitle. It's a fantastic book. You should read that. You should read Turning Pro. You should read all of his stuff. And he does a lot of podcast interviews too, so I recommend that you go check that work out. But here is the sum of the main points that I got from him. That is identifying the enemy, which is what he calls resistance, again with a capital R. And the idea of resistance is the thing that you want to do the most is the thing that you're going to avoid like the plague. And that is something that it is true. Like we all do all sorts of self-sabotage. Like, I don't know, there is what I call, let's say, noble self-sabotage. That is, okay, no, I'm going to focus on my work because I owe this to the community, to God, to my wife, to my children and all that. And that's true, that's noble, it's great. But then you're not doing the work you want to be doing. Then you get to middle life crisis. That's James Hollis' work, that's for later. Or you can do that in a destructive way. You cheat, you lie, you procrastinate, you are in fear, you are like paralyzed, you sabotage other people, you diminish yourself and others. That's another thing that happens. And we do that in all sorts of creative ways. I need to learn more about this. Oh, I need to do this before. Oh, I can only, now that I've wasted all this time, now it needs to be the super project. Sounds familiar? So that's a trap. That's all part of resistance. I think seeing this in the context of what Stephen Pressfield says is an amazing tool for you to consider. Now, on a more, let's say, tool-based note, I would also recommend taking a look at Julia Cameron's The Artist Way book. It has a lot of interesting tools like going on artist dates, which actually inspired a podcast that I used to do with me and my wife. Maybe we'll come back to that. But the idea of going on an artist date is that you take yourself on a date on something that is inspiring to you. I think that's very important. That's, in a way, what I'm trying to do in this show too, that is take you on an artist date, show you things that may inspire you to act. That's what I'm trying to do. And she also talks about the idea of morning pages, of doing, it's basically like a self-help, self-hypnosis, self-therapy that you write long form 3 pages every day. You do all these exercises to unlock your creativity, and that may be a path for you to choose which project to work on. 3 authors that I'd love you to share with you. One is you can go that on the bro route, but that's not disparagement. That's an amazing guy called Jocko Willink. He is like a former Navy SEAL. He is this consultant, writer. He writes children's books. He has, like, I think, a movie coming up later based on one of his books. He talks about leadership. One book that really inspired me that he wrote is called Discipline Equals Freedom. He has one video on YouTube called Good, about basically sucking up and actually taking the advantage of the disadvantages that you have. It's a fantastic resource, focusing on discipline and having the discipline that you are actually doing things and you see yourself as a person that can do things will unlock a lot of things, including which projects to work on. He also has this idea of prioritize and execute, so actually go systematically through things, through what you can do, and actually go and do stuff. Fantastic resource. Highly recommend both his podcasts. He talks a lot about war, but if you can abstract the fact that it's about that kind of subject, it's actually very useful for everyday life because that's the ultimate situation. Now, another way you can do this that I think is very interesting too and very useful is what Follow Tim Ferriss for Our Work Week, Tribe of Mentors, all those amazing books. He has amazing podcasts too, which really inspired me. But I want to talk about 2 concepts that he talks about. One is lifestyle design. That is, you're thinking about the kind of lifestyle you want to be having. And right now, in a few months, years, whatever, and you consider that thing from a lifestyle point of view. Because you may be, oh, I need to change all my life and go do this thing, but then you're just focusing on doing that thing, and that may not bring the lifestyle that you want. And that's an important issue, which will come again later. But the tool that he does, that I actually used a couple times, he does every month, he says, that is called fear setting. And the idea of fear setting is you approach that thing that you're thinking or you're considering doing from a pros cons point of view, and then you see basically fear setting is, okay, think of the worst case scenario. Think of a likely scenario that is like bad, and then you see like, what can I do to remediate that? If I go on this adventure and then, I don't know, I lose my money, no one's interested in the work, what can I do to mediate that? Oh, maybe I can work for 6 months in another job or come back to this. Like, there's all sorts of things you can consider. I recommend you go take a look. There is a TED Talk that he talks about this. He talks about this on his podcast, and there's an article that I will link to that he just basically goes through this process, which is amazing. Finally, I want to mention something that I've been using for many, 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 many years. That is the Getting Things Done methodology by David Allen. He had this book called Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity. I highly recommend his lectures. He has amazing work, especially like in the 2000s, in the beginning when he was writing it. He has another book that is very cool called Making It All Work. And I'm not going to go into his methodology, but the point that he does and that really inspires me is this idea of this altitude game. It's like, imagine this airplane that is on the runway. The runway are your tasks, the email to send, the call Fred about that. It's a little inside joke for people that know David Allen's methodology. Then you have at 10,000 feet, you have your projects. That's all the physical projects with like next actions and objectives. Like, I'm going to do this thing. This is what this is about. Then you have a list of all your projects and all your action steps related to that. Then you have your 20,000 feet if you're going up on the plane, where you can actually see it from all the roles you have in your life. So if you're a father, if you're a mother, if you're a daughter, if you are like all the hats you wear on your work or in your personal life, you coach a team, you do whatever you do, that's where you see those roles. At 30,000 feet, you see sort of like your plans for 1 to 2 years or 5 years, whatever, like a longer term plan that can inform all those situations. They're sort of like, well, how is your situation going to be changing in 1 to 2 years? And that's a very cool way of thinking about it when you're trying to decide on projects. And then you have the 40,000 feet, when, if I'm not mistaken, what he suggests is this idea of what's the work that you do? What's the thing that, okay, you don't finish this. This is what you do. Then you have 50,000 feet, which is sort of like, what's your reason for being? And I think a lot of people, and we'll talk about this later when I talk about Cal Newport, they really criticize David Allen's methodology, thinking that it's too much on the runway, it's too much about the tasks and projects. And I think they miss the point that he's really trying to integrate vertically and horizontally, as he puts it. Both, if you need clarity on what to do next, you can go either down to, okay, what's the next physical action I can do, or you can go up to the more elevated way that you can see why you're doing this. One example that he does in the book that I think is quite fascinating is, let's say that I'm trying to decide if I'm going to take this, like going out and giving some attention to this person. If you think of your immediate objectives, maybe it's not the time, but you're thinking of your point in your career, for example, in your firm, later in the future, in like about 1 to 2 years, oh, actually you should take this person to lunch. So there are these levels that you can think, and I think it's very useful. And my point with telling you all these different, like just a little quick snap on all these different resources is that I don't think there is a one plan that fits all. There is not one magic bullet. You have to get used to looking at inspiration in all sorts of different places. That's what I do. That's what has shown some results for myself. That is, you go and you try to find these resources. You go, another way of doing this is also looking into artists' lives and the biographies and all those things. And pay attention to who are you attracted to in terms of like creativity or lifestyle and all those things. And try to see what attracts you the most in that person or that like work or something like that. It's really important. It is my hope, and I'll put this out there in this video so that I can reference later, that I would love to interview all of these people. I would love to have them in the podcast. If the podcast gets big enough, I would love to talk to them from the point of view of creativity, from the point of view of how to help artists, people that are trying to get unstuck in their creative efforts. It would be amazing. I hope that happens someday. Incidentally, another cool idea from David Allen is this idea that he says that there are only two problems in the world. You either know what you want and don't know how to get it, or you don't know what you want. It's kind of cute. And then he says, then the solution is to make it up and make it happen. I'm literally quoting him in this case. And that sort of like segues into what I think is sort of like one of the meta solutions, or at least one of the common elements in all of these resources that I mentioned, that in one way or another, they tell you that you need to be doing something. While you are deciding which project to work on, you need to be working on some sort of project. You need to be moving forward. You have to have what Andrew Huberman called like a forward momentum. I think that's what he calls. Center of mass, center forward momentum. I can't remember exactly how he says, but the idea is you have to have some momentum. You have to be doing something because the work will tell you what to do. And that's something that I noticed in my life, and I will mention to you in a couple examples in a second. But this idea is you have to get one thing that is small, that is doable, that you can do soon. It's not like, okay, I'm going to write a book while I think of how to end world hunger. And it has to be something a little bit smaller than that. And that brings me to one of the unlocks for me that I hope can also serve for you. The first one was to find a place. Find a place where you actually go to do your creative work. Even if it is a one thing that you do, I don't know, it can be all sorts of things. It can be going to the library, it can be going to a park, it can be going on a travel, which is what I do. But I was usually going on travels in a very, let's say, okay, work way. Where can I go shoot? Where can I go record? Where is this? Like, it was very, not mechanical, but it was very goal-oriented, but not a source of inspiration, believe it or not. And then when I came here to this place, I decided to get a spot that had a view of the pyramids because I had this relationship with it since I was 8 years old, and I really wanted to see it. And not only go see and go away, because going to the pyramids is a little bit of a hassle. There are so many cafes and places around the pyramid that you can go and just enjoy a coffee, enjoy shisha, enjoy whatever you want, and look at the pyramids and stay there and maybe bring a notebook and work. I'm not saying that you need to come to Cairo to work, but I will show you in just a bit my spot. But here's the objective of the spot. It's sort of like you can pray anywhere, right? But it's cool to have churches if you are a praying person, or mosques, or temples, or whatever denomination you have. The place where you do that work deeply makes a difference. That's how I see for art. Of course, you can fall into the trap that I need this in order to do my work. Bukowski on Air and Light and Place. There's a poem by him that is all about that. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is, considering your situation right now, that's what I did. Where can I create a place, even if it's my couch? I will make this place beautiful to my standards, and this is where I do my work. Even if it is, how long do you have? You have a half an hour, okay, you go there for a half an hour. You pay tribute to yourself. You really try to do that. And you trust that you go in there with the goal of doing something, that it gets you inspired to do something, that inspiration will come. And when it comes, you grab it. That's what I did. Looks like I'm giving advice, but I'm literally telling my internal thought of how I did it for myself. And now let me take you to the place where this happened. So this is my favorite spot in Cairo. I'm very blessed, very happy to be here at the Yasmina B&B, where I'm doing my art residency together with Yana. But I really wanted to take you here to show exactly the spot where lots of things changed for me. I was looking at the pyramids every day, having my coffee, trying to do my morning routine. I have this opportunity. I made this possible. I'm not a multimillionaire. I had to sacrifice a lot of stuff to be able to travel the world as I'm doing. but I did it, so then I was enjoying it, and I really have this connection since I was 8 years old to actually see the pyramids, and now I get to see it every day for a few months in this collaboration, in an art space, in collaboration with other artists and doing my work. And this one day was lit up, and I said, you know what, I need to come and I need to drum, and that came out as my first song, and I'm very happy that I was able to do this. As the Orientalist painters from Europe that came here 2 centuries ago, I'm reading a book about that right now, they were inspired by these places, and now I get a chance to be part of that tradition of people that come and saw these beautiful things that inspire us. As Dante Alighieri said, beauty that inspires us to act, beauty that inspires us to create our own works, inspired by the beauty of nature, by the beauty and the amazing craft of humankind as the example that we have behind. And that's sort of like the main inspiration I want to give to people that watch my show, that take a look at my photographs, that listen to my music, watch my lectures. That's what I want to be doing. I'm very glad that I found that voice, that I found that confidence, that I hope you hear in my voice, that this is where it happened. And unlike the Orientalist painters of old, that they at most had letters, or they painted, or they drew what they're doing, I'm actually showing you the place where I am, the place where I was when I created my first things. And I'm very happy to have you in this journey with me. So now that we're back, let's show you the place. I know it's pretty awesome if you're into ancient Egypt, but my point with showing that was not a humble brag or flex or whatever. It's really not. The point was, this is where I got my unlock for this current point. I got unlocks when I was working in... Actually, let me tell you this story, because it will be a cool contrast. I was 27. I was working for the Brazilian Ministry of Science and Technology, and I was so miserable in that job. No one had ambition to actually do the work properly. It's a government job in Brasilia, the capital of the country. Most people were there just to get their paychecks because they had tenure. I had tenure. And it was so difficult to do the work that I wanted to do there. It was in science popularization, relationship of art and science, and trying to bring knowledge of science using my communication skills as like undergrad in advertising to actually do some interesting work there. And it was an uphill battle. It was impossible. I was really depressed. One night in my small apartment there was no light. So I lit a candle. And I wrote on my notebook 75 things I wanted to do. Why 75? Because the first ones would be like climb Mount Everest. For me, it was literally walk on the pyramids by night, create my own band, play for internationally acclaimed ballet dancers, do a gallery exhibit, write a book, sell a company. It had all sorts of crazy stuff. And then it also had some stuff over time, because you have to fill it up. It was like, what's my eternal life? How do I want to be? What kind of things I want to be exploring? How calm I want to be? How courageous I want to be? Those are the things that are important. You sort of start seeing themes. That's why you write so many things. That was a change in my momentum. I decided to go do a master's degree in Canada. It really sparked a lot of new things in my life, but it's because I had the opportunity, I lit a candle, and I decided to write about what things that I wanted to do. So you don't need to have a fancy space to do this. It can be anywhere, wherever you are. What I did, and I'll give you a couple practical things before we get into our book review, which is the thing that really unleashed, was this is the small steps. You have to find you doing something. You have to go and create. You have to go do something. So I was really interested. As I said, I'm a musician, so I've been playing for a long time. I played with a lot of world music bands. I played in all sorts of ensembles with different, like Persian music, Arabic music, Turkish music, then Brazilian music, Gaelic, tradition, like rock and roll, all kinds of things. I really love to mix and match, topic for another day, cultures from around the world. But I really wanted to compose. I can compose drum solos, things that are percussion based, but I'm not a trained musician. It's not like I know, I was working with some of the best musicians in the world in Canada, some guys that were amazing in their own fields. And then you could go and get a guy that plays sitar, and the girl that plays pipa, and one person plays oud, an amazing singer that is also a dancer. It's like, it was fantastic. So I got, in a way, a little bit intimidated that, oh, who am I to compose? Then one day I thought, you know what, I actually want to compose. Then I saw the pyramids, and then I said, okay, let me just go and play my drum. And here's what I did. It's a small step. This is a small keyboard. It's just 2 octaves, but you can connect to your computer. And the cool thing about this is that then you can use software that creates called virtual instruments. It's not like the 90s that you have those like cheesy, weird keyboard sounds. They have amazing realistic sounds on these keyboards, on these libraries. And what I decided to do was, okay, let me learn how to do this. Not go to school and spend 2 years and try to do it. I'll try to make a song. So what I did was I recorded drums, and then I just improvised. I learned one scale, and I improvised with the violin with me on the pyramids. I had some, let's say, mythological reasons for that. The drum that I was using was a clay drum that was made in Turkey, and the design of this drum that I play, it's actually as old as the pyramids. When the pyramids were being built, a drum like that was being played. So to me, it was cool to play and just to play around and see what happened. Then, one night, the pyramids were lit, because they sometimes do light shows with pyramids. And then I said, no, I need to go and play something. I'll play drums. I don't have a song yet, but I'll play drums, and then I'll add the music on top of that later. The other thing that happened was literally in this table, I got my keyboard one day, and then I said, you know what? My first song, this was in the beginning of the year. That is, I said, you know what? I'll have a deadline. I will make a song that I'll give as a gift. And so I spent the whole night just writing the song so that in a couple days I would have that song given to her. Then I worked a little bit more on that, and I actually discovered, okay, how do you publish these things? And now you can find it. It's on iTunes, it's on Spotify, it's on YouTube, it's everywhere. And why am I mentioning this? Because it needs to find you working, because me working on that song, even though it was not, oh, what's the big vision of this? It was one thing that I wanted to learn a couple of things. So I learned that I could learn. I learned to respect and disrespect the art, which you need to do. It cannot be so sacred that you don't touch. You need to touch it. And the need to touch it is by not being perfect. At least that's how I see it. And that's how I approach music. And then I thought, you know what? I should approach my photography that way, because to me, photography is sacred. More sacred than music. I thought, that's a trap. And that project unleashed what I call my pilot season, that I decided to do 3 or 4 different photo projects. Then I decided to do this video project. I decided to actually put music on top of certain photos. That's coming out next week. And to basically unlock a lot of things for me, but I still do not have a vision, which project to go through. I could go through this route, or this route, or that route, or this route. God forbid you try to do all at the same time like I did. Which brings me to the next section, an actual official section of our episode today. That is me talking about one book that I will recommend. I was listening to an interview on Andrew Huberman's podcast with Cal Newport. Cal Newport, he is a professor of, I think, theoretical computer science. He is also like a productivity guru in the world. He has this idea called the deep life. He was talking about like some contrarian ideas. He was the one that gave some jabs on David Allen. And he sort of has a point for certain things, but I think certain things is not very on David Allen's full methodology. But he has some great points that I think are very interesting. So I was listening to that interview, and I dove into his book, which I'm going to mention to you, which was the thing that unlocked a lot of things. The book's called Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. It is an amazing resource. I also recommend, there's another book by him called Deep Work and So Good They Can't Ignore You, and he has a bunch of books, but these are the ones that sort of like work together in a way, but specifically about slow productivity, which is something that I struggled with. That is this idea that you have all these projects, so you want to do advances in all of them, And so they all go super slow in parallel. That's sort of like how I work. And then, oh, this one is coming to a deadline, so let me work on this. And then it sort of like gets this burnout feel, which is not fun. And what he defends on this particular book, he has 3 principles. Do fewer things, work at a natural pace, obsess over quality. Here's what I got from it that was the unlock for me. The idea of do fewer things is not necessarily that you're going to just do less things to be less ambitious. That's not what he's talking about. It's basically do fewer things at a time so you can really put your mental work into those things, because over time you will be more productive. You don't need to be productive in 3 months. You can be productive over 3 years. Right? It's the body of work that you're creating. And as creatives, we sort of like underestimate that. The second principle is work at a natural pace. And that is actually very cool because he gives a lot of examples, like from, let's say, historical knowledge workers, lots of artists, lots of writers, some scientists, and talking about the idea that you will have certain times where you're going to be frantically working through projects, and there are times where you're going to go slowing down, and that how the steady work also sort of like wins over in the end because you are not burning out and the quality of your work goes up. And that's the third element that he talks about that sort of like glues everything together, that is this idea of obsess over quality. When I read this, I was like, okay, all alarm bells, all sirens of doom were telling me, wait, what the hell? We are supposed to not to be perfectionists. We're not supposed to be worried about quality, otherwise nothing will come out. And the way that he talks about it is that if you do these things, this is sort of like the glue that gets these 2 ideas together of do fewer things because you want quality, so you're going to do less things, and then over time it's going to be nice. And you work at a natural pace so that you don't burn out, and for that you need to focus on quality. You want to give out good work, but of course you don't want to fall. That he even admits, like in some of his writing, that that's like something that you need to keep an eye on when you're focusing on quality. Otherwise, things will stay on the imagination or the wishing, even worse, forever. The book is fascinating, very cool, very actionable. And what got me was another idea that he gets, which will be my podcast recommendation, which is Cal Newport has a podcast, which will be my recommendation of the week. That it's already around like almost 300 episodes. They are about an hour long. They are really in depth. He really does like replies to questions, just like what I want to do. So I'm really inspired by his work in many ways. And there he also talks about some of the other concepts that really, besides these 3 elements of his slow productivity book, that have really helped me, which was this concept that he calls the deep life. So you have this idea of, he called the deep life stacks, which start with discipline. So you do something every day that will teach you that you are a disciplined person. Then you have another layer that is this, let's say, values, foundations, like your objectives. Then you have what he called calm, which is have your systems. And then you have your plan. So that was an interesting way of seeing it. I'm not implementing exactly how he talks about, because I'm very biased towards David Allen's approach. But here I'm going to say the things that really unlocked for me. First, his idea of time blocking, that you will protect time to work. The way that David Allen talks about it and the way that I used to do it is I have this list of projects that are either active or someday maybe. If they're active, I'll try to do as soon as possible. Problem is I have too many active projects in my list. That's an idea that Cal Newport says, no, do one at a time. You can do this pool system that you say, okay, I do this one now, then I do this one now, then I do this one now. Another difference is that David Allen tries to say, okay, don't put anything on your calendar that is not a commitment that needs to happen on that day. He says on your calendar, only go reminders for things that happen that day, at any time it will be okay, or things that happen on specific times. All the rest is on your to-do list that you do contextually according to your circumstance and your energy levels and all that. That doesn't work to me. I think it works for other people. They're more, let's say, black belt on the GTD methodology, not to get too geeky about it. But to me, I really like the idea of the time blocking, that I get a task that I need to do, And I come and I say, at this time, I will protect this time and do it for me. Because then things happen. And I'm not on a clock. I know that in a week I'll have to deliver this video, this photo, this song, this whatever, like product to a client. Okay, that goes on the calendar already so that I can work on it with time. The other idea that I think is very cool that he said is to have different places to do different things. That really helps. And the main thing, that's a godsend. He's really against social media, so I understand his point of view. I like social media, but I don't like the way that I consume it. I don't like the way that most people consume it. And I'm showing you this in social media, so I'll not be a hypocrite. It's a cool tool. We just need to drink responsibly, right? So the problem is that now we're high all the time, basically, right, on social media, on the dopamine of like scrolling. So he talks a lot about the idea of time blocking. Has a lot to do with, okay, fewer distractions, one thing, fewer contextual changes. I've been doing this for a couple weeks now, and it has been a godsend. I don't listen to podcasts at different times. I don't listen to music. I don't go scrolling. If I go on social media, it's precision. It's in and out to go and do certain things. I'm not going there because I'm bored. It's a fantastic approach, and I highly recommend you go to his podcast and go listen to what he's saying. It unlocked for me. All these other authors and inspirations that I told you really helped. But now with this, there is this kind of calm that it's like, okay, I don't need to do everything at once. I will choose. And that was the process for me to choose. That really unlocked. In the end, it's a way to reimagine your life, which in my work, all my work is about reimaginings. My first series was about reimagining science heroes. I actually related that to the hero's journey, so I know a little bit about that stuff. My Orientalist series was about that, and even my current ethnic fashion work, they are about reimagining time and space. You'll see that later. But now let's go to a little bit of a more fun thing that I just wanted to mention to you that I think would be cool. It's a couple more, let's say, on the entertainment side of recommendations. And that is, I want to, on the idea of reimaginings, I want to recommend a series that I'm almost finishing watching for the second time, actually, with my wife. That is Sherlock. It's this British TV series with Benedict Cumberbatch as Sherlock Holmes and Martin Freeman as Dr. John Watson. It is set in sort of like contemporary times, but slightly back when blogs were a thing. So they had this thing that Watson has a blog where he talks about the adventures of Sherlock. And the original books, it's Watson's accounts of the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. So it's really embedded and deeply rich with the lore of the original Sir Arthur Conan Doyle stories. Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss, the creators of the show, were really able to capture, to reimagine Sherlock Holmes. And another thing that I wanted to mention, that's why I recommend this, because I'm really into the reimaginings, and maybe it will also do this idea, okay, you are this version of yourself that exists this time. Why not create this other one that is more fun, more slick, more interesting? That's how I got it. Interested. It gives me ideas for characters. It gives me ideas of photos to do in different kinds of scenarios. The photography is amazing. It's really cool. It's really pretty. It's so incredibly smart. The way that they make, like visually, the show how Sherlock thinks, all the deductions and all those things, they really work the way that they are doing it. The actors are, of course, amazing. The actress that plays Irene Adler, the way she was reimagined, is incredible. The other advantage of this on the slow productivity, less distraction point is that they're short seasons. There are 4 seasons of 3 episodes each. Each episode is about 1.5 hours. It's sort of like 2 acts, the way that I could see it. The cool thing is that they can really work on quality. So that's a cool reminder related to Cal Newport's idea and maybe some of the work that you would like to be doing. It's like, have a master vision, have all these little elements. Like, they didn't come up with the whole thing at once. They go, okay, the photography will be this way. Moriarty, the arch nemesis of Sherlock, it's an amazing actor and amazing character, the way that they reconceptualize that. And that has been an amazing source of joy and inspiration for me, and I wanted to share that with you. And I have a fascination with Sherlock. About a year ago, I wrote a post, and it's based on a photo that I took of, actually, it's sort of a self-portrait. It's me and Yana that we took at the Habu Temple in Luxor. And I wrote a post on my social media. You can find it at Pedro Bonatto on Instagram and everywhere, or on my blog. And again, I'll have the list. But I think it would be cool for me to read from time to time a text that I wrote that I think is relevant to this. It sort of like ties up a lot of these concepts that we were talking about. And if you are here until now, I really thank you. And I hope you find this interesting. I hope that this has, even if you're skipping through the different sections, you can find some inspiration and can get something for yourself. So let me read for you, and I'll have to put my glasses. See the timing too, that has to do with slow productivity. This was written about a year ago, when I first arrived in Egypt. I went to many other places in between. Now I'm back to Cairo, but this is what I wrote back then. It's called Looking versus Observing. Since I got to Egypt, I've been thinking a lot of Sherlock Holmes. Maybe it was because I first read his stories about the same time I got interested in ancient Egypt as an 8-year-old, navigating the imagination traps of pyramids, dinosaurs, space, comic books. But that wasn't it. I assumed it could be obvious association with the process of archaeology and his detective work, putting together complicated stories based on scant evidence and deductive reasoning. But that didn't feel quite right. The answer came at the incredibly beautiful and inexplicably less visited Habu Temple in Luxor. At one of the magnificent columns, we stopped and looked. Gazing at the ceiling, you could still see some of the original colors that once covered the temple walls. That was the moment when the right phrase from Sherlock to Watson came to mind. You see, but you do not observe. That was it. The most precious gift of travel is that it can give you a chance not only to see, but also to observe what's around you and how it connects to your own story. Looking at these majestic feats of art, science, engineering, belief, forced me to confront the questions every traveler faces when in the presence of beauty. Why did I come here? Why am I visiting all these places? Where am I taking my life? What these ruins tell about the temple I want to build myself. Yana wanted to put on beautiful outfits and dance. I wanted to photograph, to play drums, to have a massive party at the temple. Most of all, I wanted to make beautiful things, inspired by this ancient beauty, when each move and click and beat had enough magic to bring back all colors to the temple. So much stuff, potentially life-altering stuff, is all around us. How many clues to our personal mysteries would reveal themselves to us if only we could stop looking like Watson and truly observing like Holmes? What secrets can we uncover when, in the ruins of our past, we find unfaded colors still remaining? I wish I could say the answers were elementary. But here's a possible one. That day, Yana danced, I photographed, and I observed that those are some of the foundation stones in the temple that we are building. I share this post because it takes a while, it takes some time. And I think the more we are okay with it without being in procrastination forever waiting mode, the better off we'll be. We're almost at the end here, but I still wanted to share another artist that has been inspiring me a lot. And it's going to be this segment in the show that is about world music. I will always recommend a song and an artist for you to check out. Sometimes I will not be able to show the music or to actually, because of copyright issues, but I urge you to go check it out, go check this artist, and I'll tell a little bit about the song, a little bit about the tradition and why it was inspiring me and what in the context of what we're talking about. Because I think inspiration can hit us from lots of places, but it's sort of like this wind that we need to catch with our actions. Our actions are the sail that takes us to places, and then we can get that inspiration to take us places, but it cannot be just us looking at it. So this is something that I would like to share with you, something that I'm doing right now based on the work of, there is this artist called Valeria Vovk. I think that's her last name. She's a singer from Ukraine. She does beautiful songs, beautiful interpretations of traditional songs, of more modern songs. She collaborates with a lot of artists. I highly recommend you go check out her work. But this particular song, her interpretation, is sort of like that idea that I mentioned from Dante Alighieri, beauty that inspires you to act. She is wearing this traditional Ukrainian outfit and she's singing this traditional song that I forgot about it. This song, the translation of the name is the willow plank, sort of like related to this tradition of, it's sort of like a wedding theme kind of songs, not really, but kind of, where they use it a lot in those kinds of traditions. It's like it represents a lot of things about, especially willow trees, and a lot of Ukrainian folk and mythology. It's important. And this plank is this way, it's this transition from girlhood to womanhood, from getting between being a girl to being a woman that is married. So it has this relationship with marriage traditions. God knows how long these traditions have been going on, and the song reflects that. So the song is called Verbova Doshechka. Sorry for my pronunciation. Maybe my wife will kill me later for my bad pronunciation. It's so beautiful, the way that she interprets. And that got me, let me make my version. Let me look for it. Let me pay attention to it. And it actually has to do with the idea of choosing projects. It gave me a vision because I had this idea for sort of like this opera style kind of like, it's basically a long story sung through music. And there was this one scene that came to my mind, again, these fragments that we use, nice notebook, to just write it down over time. And that scene got to me. I was like, okay, this is the song that needs to happen on that scene. Now I have something to do. I have this bigger project. There's this bigger show that involves like multimedia stuff. It's really complicated and interesting. I have something to do right now. I can create a song. I can have a sketch of the song. Even if I get musicians to play it later, I can do it on my own. I can take as long as I need because it's on the computer. I can do it on my own. I don't need to perform it in front of someone. I can write a scene. I can make the installation of this particular scene to show as a proof of concept. Remember our pilot season idea. So that's a way in. And now I know things that I need to learn. I will check out the problems that will be systemic in all the scenes, because if you do one scene, you can do all of them in a way. And listening to the song, listening to this artist, really inspiring you to go to act. That's what got it. This is my sail. I'm going to go on it. Maybe it will not go on forever. Maybe I will not like doing installation art, but at least I'll try. I have a point to do it. So go check out Valeria Vovk. The Ukrainian songs are really rich in the voice, so you can find different versions. Again, the reimaginings, you can find different versions of the song, all the way from like Eurovision, like with guitars and sort of like this American feel to it, to heavy metal. You can have all sorts of versions of a song. And I think that's why I included this section and this song. It's like, if you don't know Ukrainian music, that's a point in that is very personal. It's you and me, and I'm showing you a song. And that's how I want to do this. Still using the Ukrainian vibes example for this idea of choosing projects to do on an iteration, considering the timetables, considering your resources available at the time. I wanted to share with you finally one photo that I did last year with a friend of mine, Tatiana. She's a dancer and a model, and she was coming here to Cairo when I was here too. And then I asked her, oh, can you bring traditional Ukrainian outfit? I had this idea. I'm very interested in ethnic fashion. And I thought, I have so many friends that are from Ukraine that are displaced around the world. So how about we also celebrate, which is the part that I'm most passionate about, celebrate the mixing of cultures, celebrating this idea that we bring ourselves to places and we present it as a gift, and we get people's clothing and people's cultures as gifts too. And then I thought, let's do this in the pyramids. So we went there, we actually did a fashion shoot first, like with some more, let's say, modern clothing. You can see that too. But I was really excited to do this other photo that was in a traditional Ukrainian outfit. They have very intricate patterns depending on which region it is, depending on which time in history. It's really cool. And we did it. And that was, in a way, me not trying to figure out a big project or trying to choose, just I chose according to heart. Again, a pilot, just to try it out. And that also informed me, oh, I like this. Oh, but it's not complete yet. I need to go do this other thing first. Or I want to do these photos all over the world, if I can, with Ukrainian models and wearing traditional outfits in different places around the world. That would be cool. I did one. Let's see where I'm going to do the next. But it's not like I'm going to necessarily go travel the world to do this, but it's a pilot project. I think that's a very cool idea to do, but it also informed me that I really have that interest. I really have that passion. It really resonates with me, not only for Ukrainian outfits, but for outfits from all over the world. And then I thought, okay, I can make it into a series that I do through time. Again, sole productivity. No real, you want to be as fast as you can, but not as fast that you stumble. So that's the thing that I wanted to share with you finally. And then, now, always I want to share an element of gear, or if I have a sponsor, I will shout out at this moment. One thing from Cal Newport, he was talking a lot about rituals and having those, like I said, like a place that you go to do this. And the other thing that it's like these little tricks. And one of the tricks that I decided to do, especially because, as I said, I travel all the time. I'm always working with my wife, Fiona. So we're like this team of two trying to get a couple assistants, but right now it's just the two of us. And there was this element of distraction because it's informal, it's creative. It was not nice. So then we decided, okay, we have work time, then we have like play time, we have a more structured approach, and we have uninterrupted time. That's sacred, and the person can sort of like invoke this at any time. Let's say, oh, she's really into, I work at night, she works in the morning, so like deep work. So let's not interrupt each other on that moment. But then we created this thing that actually has been used more for myself than for our signaling. It's like this cute thing that's been on the table all this time. I mentioned a lot about candles and in my photos, the lamps. And I said I have a thing for lamps. And you'll see it later too, throughout the months. But I went to Canal Khalili, which is the big old market here in Cairo. And I bought this little traditional lamp. It's a little thing. It costs very little. This is alabaster, which is the stone used here in a lot of art in both ancient Egypt and modern. This is like a star that is very common in Islamic and Arabic traditions. It's beautiful. I really love it. So I actually sometimes light the candle and put it inside. And my idea is now I'm doing deep work. Now I'm going to work. Okay, the red just indicates I'm in red. It's like, do not come bother me. But that's not even the point. The real thing for me is this. It sounds silly. Maybe you'll have your own version of this. But to me is, I'm connected to this light source. It's this thing that is like, it's the inspiration. This is time to do my work. This is time to take myself seriously. This is time that I am connected to this, like we're in the book, like creating artwork that is inspired by travel. That's what I'm doing right now. I am part of that tradition, whether I want it or not. And I mentioned this, you will have your own personal mythology. So maybe lean into that. Maybe get a little thing for yourself that shows that you're a pro. You're trying to be a professional. You are trying to create work. And that thing reminds you of that. In the secular world, I was raised as basically an atheist. We were like never really religious, but I think we lost something from that transition to a more skeptical view because of the lack of tradition, not the lack of the divinity per se, but this connection to something more meaningful that is inside us. And that's one way that I found that groove. So now I bring this thing around. It brings me joy to see it. It's a beautiful artifact. And on that note, I just wanted to mention also, like, finally, I hope you're enjoying the show. I hope it's useful to you. So go get your cool thing. Another funny one if you want to. So this is a coffee maker, like Turkish style, like that they have here. It has a little handle that you can put, that I got as a gift, which is really cool, but I like my other one better. So I use this for my pens. So I have this, what you see here is my setup. Doesn't matter where I am, this is what I bring to be able to work. My books, my computer, my notebooks, my music, cameras, instruments. That's how it goes. So I can be portable, I can be mobile. So the summary of all of this is go get your inspirations and use them as sails so you can get action. That's what I'm trying to do for myself. If you can, really work on one thing right now that you can put it in the world and you can be proud of being working. Try not to make it so big while you think of your big plan so you can decide your next thing. So maybe the one right now you missed the mark, but you're planning the next one while you're working on something. Just thinking will not help. At least it did not help me. And now I wanted to leave you with a quote. So every episode of this kind, I wanted to have a quote for you. I have a collection of thousands of quotes, and I thought it would be cool to share with you, share with the world, all these things that I've been collecting throughout the years. And this one comes from designer L.A. Luna. You never know, you just never know. Who is out there waiting to receive exactly what you have to give? I think that's a cool quote. I think that's really amazing. And I want to take a moment and thank you for being with me. I hope I got better with time, although I tend to ramble sometimes and I go into my mind palace, Sherlock reference, and go to my Pedropedia, as my wife says, and I get all these other ideas. I hope they're useful for you. If you like this episode, I would ask you to just share with a friend that you think might find this particular information useful. That would be cool for me. It would be a gift for me if you can share it with someone that you love. Not necessarily post it on social media. If you want, you can do that too. But sort of like, just say, oh, this was cool. This inspired me. If not, you can always send a question to me or a comment or feedback, whatever you think would make the show a little bit better. I thank you for being on this basically first episode of this new way of doing things that I'm very excited about. I've been always sort of like on the edge of doing things like this, putting myself out there, and in a way, Gary Vee style, like just go ahead and just post it and see, and then maybe someone will find it interesting. Hope that was useful for you. I'd love to know what was your main takeaway. What was the thing what creative call to adventure are you going to answer? I would love to know that. I would love to see the work that you're creating over time. If you listen to this in the future, you can always reach out and talk to me about the things that are inspiring you. And I want to leave you with my final words, which is now, go follow your curiosity, go make beautiful things, and share them with the world. My name is Pedro Bonatto. This has been episode 24 of the Wondrous Podcast. Thank you for being with me here in Cairo.